Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
Episode 52. You rented those clothes, right? It was James. After he'd entered the hotel, he found his way to the elevator and went up to the second floor. As he came into the ballroom, all eyes turned to him. But unlike with Taylor, there was no excited chatter and certainly no flattery. The entire room went silent. The atmosphere became strained. James calmly walked into the room. He exuded confidence and power. "Sorry I'm a bit late, folks," he said. It wasn't lost on anyone that James was wearing a fashionable Gucci suit and an exquisite Patek Philippe watch. Many of the attendees at the reunion were affluent, high-status members of New York society. They all understood what a designer suit and a Swiss watch meant. They also noted how his clothes, coupled with his confident bearing, did not seem strange at all. In fact, he pulled it off really well. Who was this new James Tucker, they wondered. His suit alone was worth at least $3,000. He was no longer the poor guy he was in college. He must have somehow hit it big. But how? Katie and Gavin stood up at the same time. When they saw James walk into the room, they were surprised and delighted. Katie was startled, to be honest. She truly didn't think he would show up. For his part, Gavin was startled by James' outfit. He had transferred only $500 to James yesterday. Enough to buy a decent suit, but not this. Gucci? Fucking Patek Philippe? How could he have possibly come up with such an elegant ensemble? Either way, it was great to see James again. Gavin was really happy for his friend. James stood for a moment and scanned the room. He noticed Gavin and Katie right away, but there was also Latoya Greenwood, Alice Chan, Jindai Walker, and a bunch of other faces he didn't recognize right away. Even his ex-girlfriend Natalie and Noor Cole, who he saw in the Lux Villa District sales office in Tribeca, were here. James could barely suppress a grin when he saw how shocked everyone seemed to be to see him. Guys, is everything all right?" he asked. There was another second or two of silence. Then the murmur of voices slowly built back up as people engaged in hushed discussions about this dramatic development. Natalie and Noor lowered their heads at the same time. They didn't dare to lock eyes with James. Taylor regarded James coldly. He was trying to look unconcerned, but inside he was incensed. Not 2 minutes ago, he was the sole focus of attention at this reunion. He did not expect the limelight to be snatched away by a hick like James Tucker. Taylor was also wearing an expensive suit, Brooks Brothers, a sturdy old-school brand, but now he felt it was a stodgy choice compared to James's stylish outfit. He was now fuming, but he had no choice but to hold it in. There was no way for him to vent his anger without making a fool of himself. The best he could do was glare at James. Heather Cassidy, ever sensitive to Taylor's demeanor, also resented James's arrival. She didn't even invite him to take a seat. James instantly deciphered the unspoken hostility towards him. He couldn't have cared less. Katie got up and rushed over to welcome him to the reunion. "James, you made it," she said excitedly. "You kept your word. Come, sit with us." As they approached the table together, Gavin sprung from his chair and gave his old friend a bear hug. "Man, you look terrific," he said. Before James could take the empty seat beside Gavin, Natalie hurried over. "James, honey, it's so lovely to see you. Sit with me, please, over here." To everyone's surprise, James didn't even look at who they thought was his girlfriend. He sat down next to Gavin without a word to Natalie. James couldn't believe it. She was despicable. After how she treated him the other night at the Atlantic Grill, she had the balls to ask him to sit with her? She must be out of her mind to think he would have forgotten and forgiven all of that. After being so blatantly ignored by James, Natalie didn't know what to do. She was extremely embarrassed in front of everyone. Nobody in the room knew that they had broken up, but they couldn't not notice the tension between them. Their relationship had clearly gone ice cold. Katie Williams was beaming. For various reasons, she and James had never been able to get together in the past, but she was instantly smitten with this new James Tucker. Maybe they could get something going now, she thought. Plus, the way James had blown off Natalie so publicly was the cherry on the top. She was thrilled. Taylor took it all in from afar. Katie's obvious attraction to James irked him to no end. His original plan was to chat her up over the course of the evening, find some common ground upon which to build a relationship. He'd had a crush on her since college and wanted to make her his girlfriend. But James's splashy arrival spoiled his plan. In fact, the two of them looked naturally compatible as a couple. He was humiliated, which made him furious. This was his party after all. He organized it. Taylor had no intention of sitting back and watching those two make loving faces at each other all night. He clenched his fists, walked over to their table, and without asking anyone's permission, sat in the empty seat next to Katie. Then he launched right into a cutting assessment of James in front of everyone. "You rented those things, right?" he said with no preamble. "I think I've read about this before. Some warehouse out in Queens or the Bronx that specializes in leasing designer clothes to anyone who can scrape together enough cash. Did they also take a security deposit in case you get drunk and vomit on the suit? You can't pretend to be rich by renting expensive clothes, James." Taylor's words instantly caused animated discussion around the room. Everyone seemed to believe what he had to say. Of course, they all thought. James's suit and watch had to have been rented. He must have gotten them specifically for tonight. Taylor's cruel ridicule caused Katie's blood to boil. Gavin clenched his fists in anger. Katie pointed at Taylor and said, "You've gone too far." Everyone stared at James, waiting to see what he was going to do. Episode 53. Who owns the Ferrari? James was in no hurry. He waved his hand, signaling Katie to calm down. After that, he slowly swept his gaze across the crowd. He saw the mocking sneers on the faces of his classmates. Their expressions only brought a smile to his face, but there was not a trace of emotion in it. His heart had turned completely cold. Any last shred of fantasy about forging a relationship with his former classmates had died in his heart. They obviously didn't care about him, so he sure as hell didn't care about them. James had no intention to embarrass Taylor so early in the night, but since he had taken the first swing, there was no need to hold back. He just shook his head at Taylor as if to say, "Can you believe this asshole?" Then said, "Katie, Gavin, I brought each of you a little something, but I was in a hurry today, so I didn't have time to carefully select them. I hope you'll like it." He took out an exquisite Chanel purse and a second Patek Philippe watch from a bag in his hand and presented them to his stunned friends. Katie didn't show much of a reaction. She took the purse and smiled brightly. Although she was not from New York, she came from a well-off family. To her, luxury goods were a natural part of her environment. There was no need to be overly excited about them. She was content with James's consideration alone. Gavin, on the other hand, had a different reaction. When he looked at the watch James gave him, which he knew was worth at least $75,000, he immediately handed it back. This, I can't take this." James seemed mildly unhappy. "Why? I accepted your gift yesterday, didn't I?" "I know, James, but this gift is too expensive. James cut off his friend's grumbles and stuffed the watch back into his hand. "You have more excuses than my uncle when he started smoking again. Just take it already." Gavin was so touched he almost cried. He had earned not just an exquisite gift, but a true friend. When James took out the gifts, the expressions of the surrounding classmates changed again. They felt like they were on a roller coaster. One moment they were mocking James, the next they were envying him. It would be one thing if he had rented a suit and watch in order to look accomplished and cool. However, there was no such thing as renting luxury goods to give out as gifts. And these weren't knockoffs. This jaded crowd could tell that at a glance. As always, James did not run his mouth to explain anything. His actions were his proof. He was no longer the poor kid from the mountains. Except for Katie and James, the other people at the reunion felt as if they'd been humbled by James in a blunt, almost surgical fashion. Even Taylor couldn't believe this extraordinary turn of events. But he was a Taylor. He wasn't about to admit defeat just like that. "Impressive performance," he sneered. "All three of you. But sometimes it's not smart to immerse yourself too deep in a movie because eventually, all movies come to an end." His implication was clear. The three of them must have planned the whole episode in advance. It was simply a show they had put on in front of all of their classmates. Taylor realized his insinuation was a little far-fetched, but he had no other choice. He could not lose to James tonight. Absolutely not. Before James could respond, Katie said sarcastically, "Taylor, have you lost your fucking mind? The bag in my hand was released only last month. It's a limited edition. Every one of them has a serial number. It's not a prop." Gavin also smiled and chimed in. "That's right. This watch is worth, 75 grand, give or take. Would you like to touch it? Just go wash your hands first, please." The ballroom was now in an uproar. They finally believed that James had really made a fortune. The sucking up began almost instantly. "James, let me buy you a drink." "Hey, do you remember the Fish concert at SPAC? I think we went together, didn't we?" "I'll never forget that medieval history class with Professor Berg. It practically killed both of us." The change in attitude was neck-snapping. One almost had to admire these people for their blithe hypocrisy. They really knew how to bend with the social winds. Even Heather Cassidy, who had been the most toadyish toward Taylor, now gave James a kind smile. Taylor's expression was downright frightening. He was so angry he lost his words. You people." He did not know that his miserable evening had only just begun. Hearing the oily groveling from his former classmates and seeing the fake smiles on their faces, James felt nothing but disgust. But he just smiled and politely passed on their invitations and attempts to strike up conversations. He refused to bicker with Taylor either. Instead, he made his way straight to a table in the corner with only 3 seats and sat down. Katie and Gavin joined him. Taylor slunk to the bar to get a drink. He was so mad he literally thought he was going to have a heart attack. He'd never been so humiliated. Never. In an attempt to ease the stifling atmosphere, Heather quickly jumped in. Since everyone is here, dinner can be served now." Everyone forgot about Taylor's speech, including Taylor. No one was in the mood. Amid the awkwardness, a waiter entered the ballroom. "Sorry to disturb you. May I ask if anyone here is the owner of a Ferrari 812 parked at Hudson Parking on West 12th Street? They need you to move your car. It's blocking other drivers who are trying to leave." The waiter's announcement silenced the already quiet private room. Even the low whisper stopped. A Ferrari 812? That was a $5 million sports car. Almost everyone's first impression was that Taylor was the only person in this room who could afford such a car. After all, his family's wealth went back generations. That was no secret. When the waiter finished speaking, everyone looked at Taylor. Even Heather thought it was a well-timed opportunity for him to regain some face. But the scene only dumped another bucket of embarrassment on top of miserable Taylor. "Why are you all looking at me?" he said. "That's not my car." In the meantime, James patted his pockets and felt the clunk of a key fob. Shit, he thought. I forgot to leave the damn key with the attendant. He didn't waste any time. He took out the key fob to the Ferrari 812 and handed it to the waiter. "I'm terribly sorry," he said with genuine respect. "I hate to trouble you, but would you mind bringing this to the lot so they can move my car?" "No problem, sir," the waiter said. He took the fob and left the room. If the room was silent before, it was like a crypt now. No one in their wildest dreams expected that the owner of a Ferrari 812 was the kid from the country. It finally dawned on them. James Tucker was no longer an ordinary guy. He'd arrived. Episode 54. A yacht, too? James didn't intend to let him off the hook so easily. Since Taylor had attempted to publicly humiliate him, he didn't hesitate to return the favor. Should I go fetch the registration for the Ferrari? You know, in case you think I rented that too? Taylor just stewed in silence, his face contorted in rage. But it wasn't over yet. James reached into the pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a piece of paper. In case you're interested, here's my A1F boat pilot license. Would you like to inspect it? Make sure it's not a forgery. Taylor's eyes betrayed his utter shock. An A1F license was a rare accomplishment even in his social circles. You're right, Taylor, James said. Reality can be cruel sometimes. Taylor wanted to retort, but there was nothing he could say. He was powerless. The A1F license was legit. He'd seen many of them when he'd vacationed on chartered yachts. If he tried to refute its authenticity, it would only show his ignorance. He kept his mouth shut. James felt terrific. Back in college, Taylor had always looked down on him. Today, James was happy to rub his nose in it. In case you're wondering, he said, I've been kind of bored lately, so I bought an Explorer-class yacht. A yacht? Explorer class? It was an exclusive toy of the super-rich, a cut above any ordinary yacht. The Ferrari 812 had already sent everyone's head spinning, but now James also had a private luxury yacht. The others in the room could no longer sit still. They lost all pretense of dignity and surrounded James's table. Mary Baldino smiled and said coyly, I've never been on a yacht in my life. You better call me when you throw a party on it. Larry Mordecai leaned over the table and smiled. Where do I sign up? Bill Novak hoisted his drink and said, Count me in too. I'd love to see your yacht. Even Heather walked over and looked pleadingly, and a little pathetically, James thought, at him. Can I attend the yacht party too? It was almost comical how everyone tried to curry favor with James, including Noor, who had been so haughty at the Murray sales office. Although the majority of these people were rich kids from New York, they were not rich enough to own private yachts. Having one was the ultimate status symbol in their world. Wildly entertained by this gush of hypocrisy, James grinned and told them, No problem. The only rule aboard my boat is to have fun. He had absolutely no intention of throwing any such party, let alone inviting these shitheads, but he was enjoying the moment nonetheless. Taylor stood alone over by the bar. He had never been ignored like this before, but he didn't dare try to challenge James now. If it were just the nice clothes and even the Ferrari 812, he felt that James might not be so untouchable. But an Explorer-class yacht? And the license to sail it himself? Was an entirely different matter. This guy was out of reach. The reunion had lost all meaning to him. If he stayed, he'd only be hanging himself. Taylor made up his mind to leave and headed for the door. What? Is the class president leaving already? It was James, raising his voice just enough for everyone to hear. But the reunion's just begun. Don't you want to stay and reminisce with us? Us. Taylor caught the subtext immediately. Instead of him and the group against James, it was now James and the group against him. James was the insider. He was the outsider. But Taylor was still smart enough to keep his head. He knew he had to play his cards carefully to maintain some semblance of honor. In a gentle tone, he said, Friends, I'm sorry. Something important just came up, so I need to take my leave. Good night. He left quickly, the ballroom door slamming shut behind him. With Taylor out of the picture, James became the center of attention. All of the toasting, fawning, and flattery was directed at him alone now. Katie naturally became James's companion for the evening. It was evident he was single, so she was not going to let this opportunity slip away. There would be no more regrets. She was done bottling up her feelings. Watching James and Katie pair up was too painful for Natalie. She quietly slipped out the door and left the reunion alone. The atmosphere in the room was festive as everyone ate, drank wine, and chatted happily. James couldn't get over all of the phoniness. When he'd had enough, he began the process of saying his farewells and heading for the exit. He had no interest in hitting a bar afterward or joining an after-hours party in one of the Jane Hotel suites. His goal tonight had been achieved. The rest of his classmates scattered into the night, and the gathering came to an end. Although Gavin wanted to grab a drink with James at a bar, he knew it was not the right time. Instead, they made plans to catch up another day, and he caught an Uber home. James and Katie stood together on the street in front of the Jane. Katie smiled and said, "A Ferrari, huh? Take me for a spin?" "No, sorry," James replied, a serious expression crossing his face. She frowned. Why did he reject her without hesitation? Did he not like her? Was she not pretty enough? Her mind raced with thoughts. But in the next moment, he grabbed her and said, "Since I had quite a bit to drink, you have to take me for a ride tonight." Katie was delighted by his flirting. "James, you are really bad," she said. The two of them linked arms and strolled around the block to the parking lot. Katie sat in the driver's seat of the Ferrari 812, feeling a little nervous. She'd driven plenty of high-end vehicles in her day, but they were ordinary models for the rich. Jaguars, Range Rovers, that sort of thing. This was her first time driving a high-performance sports car, and such an expensive one at that. James pointed out the various features and taught her how to start it step by step. Their faces were almost touching as he leaned over to explain the ignition process. It was surprisingly complicated, involving a precise series of switches, buttons, and lights. James could clearly feel her breathing picking up. She was feeling nervous, he could tell, and not just because of the car. Although Katie was about the same age as James, she was relatively inexperienced with men. Her father was a bit old-fashioned and had kept a tight leash on her since she was young. She had dated guys in high school and college, but nothing ever went too far. It was all very prim and proper. Therefore, when James grabbed her hand and accidentally brushed her breast, she was so flustered she felt weak all over. James found Katie to be every bit as beautiful as Vanessa and Krista Moser, who were both drop-dead gorgeous. She also had smart, a solid background, the total package. He was reluctant to let go of her hand to let her finish starting the Ferrari. Although she was dreadfully nervous, Katie was elated. "James, where are we going?" she asked. He responded with a single word, "Anywhere." Katie nodded and started the engine, then slowly drove out of the parking lot and headed east on West 12th Street. The atmosphere in the car became quiet. Neither of them spoke for a while, a stifling silence hanging in the air. James finally broke the ice. "You seem nervous." Katie's eyes darted over to him, then went back to the windshield. "Really? Maybe because I'm driving a sports car worth $500,000 for the first time." James teased her. "No, I mean you look nervous when you see me." Now she was so nervous that she started to stutter. I do not." "Listen to you," he laughed. "You can't even spit out a sentence." Seeing her fidgeting behind the wheel, he stopped teasing and said, "Let's go to the docks. I'll tell you how to get there." Katie nodded. Then, under James's direction, they drove towards Perkins Pier. Episode 55, Homeward Bound. "James, is this yacht really yours?" Katie took in the lavish luxury yacht she was aboard, her face full of questions. The sea breeze blew her black hair into soft waves. James was captivated by her delicate features bathed in the moonlight. He gave her a naughty smile. "Yup, this is mine, as is the other beauty here." He could no longer control himself. He gently held Katie's face in his hands and planted a kiss on her luscious lips. A jolt of excitement raced through her entire body. The warmth of his lips struck her dumb. She had been kissed before, but nothing like this. Her hands went stiff, and she had no idea where to put them. James's move was too sudden, catching her off guard. But she liked his forwardness and was intoxicated by the feeling of being wrapped in a man's arms. She felt as if she had been waiting for this all her life. Gradually, Katie wrapped her slender arms around James's waist. She immersed herself completely in the moment. Although he was consumed with lust, James knew his boundaries. He did not want to do anything that might scare Katie. After a long, passionate kiss, the two of them sat side by side on one of the comfortable sofas on the deck, gazing at the bright stars. The sound of waves was like soothing music. Otherwise, all was quiet. Although neither of them had expressed it, they both knew they had made a strong connection. They sat, enjoying the silence, the beauty, each of them without a care. James knew that not long ago he had shared a kiss with another beautiful woman on this same deck. As his thoughts wandered, he resolved to pursue both of them. He wouldn't let them fall into the arms of another man. He knew, though, that this path would not be easy. Early the next morning, James brought Katie home, then drove to the Lux. He had already booked a flight home to see his parents. After freshening up and packing, he headed straight to the airport. James had changed back into his usual casual clothes. As much as he appreciated his Gucci suit, he found it uncomfortable. He liked the freedom of his old clothes. He felt more like himself wearing them. As he carried his travel bag to the Lux District entrance, he caught sight of Krista and Vanessa. They seemed to be having a chat. He walked over. "Hey ladies, what's going on?" "Good morning, Mr. Tucker," Krista said. "Miss Harrison is here to see you, actually." James couldn't help but notice that Vanessa was also carrying a travel bag. He laughed and said, "What, are you running away from home and here to say goodbye to me?" She chuckled, but her sly smile seemed full of hidden intentions. "You're only half right, but I'm not here to say goodbye." It was an odd response, but before he could follow up, Vanessa changed the topic. "Enough about me. Where are you off to?" "Oh, I'm going back to my hometown to see my folks. I'll be back in New York in a few days." He looked at her and suddenly he realized it. "Hey, you're not planning to go home with me, are you?" Vanessa gave him a cute smirk. "Bingo! You're really smart, you know that?" James was taken aback, but he ran with it. "I thought you were acting a little strange, but I'm sorry. No, I can't take you with me." "Why not?" Vanessa pouted. Damn, she looked cute. He put up a mock protest. "Look, Vanessa, my parents think I should have gotten married long ago, but I don't even have a girlfriend. If you go with me, everyone in my hometown will treat you as my girlfriend. It isn't appropriate." Now Krista couldn't hold back her giggling. She could tell that James was teasing Vanessa. But Vanessa wasn't hearing it. She put her hands on her hips and coldly harumphed. "I don't care. You're bringing me with you. No argument." James was incredibly pleased by this unforeseen development. All right. Since I have a girlfriend knocking at my door, I'd be a fool not to open it and let her in. Vanessa patted him playfully on the head. "That's right." The flight landed on time at Richmond International Airport in Virginia. Vanessa looked at James happily, her eyes full of curiosity. She wanted to know more about him and his past. "So, I imagine your family lives in Windsor Farms or Stonewall Court or one of the other nice sections of Richmond. No wonder you're so rich." "Who told you I inherited money from my family? Or that I'm from Richmond? We've still got some traveling to do. I come from a small town in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's a 4-hour drive from here, and not all of it on paved roads." Vanessa smiled gamely. "Well, it sounds like an adventure." Inside, though, she was uncertain. How far out in the sticks did he really live? James could sense her hesitation. "Hey," he said, "if you don't want to go, it's not too late. I'll grab you an Airbnb in Richmond and put you on the first flight to New York tomorrow. My treat." Vanessa just snorted. I'm no stranger to mountains, you know. When I was 8, I went on the Annapurna Circuit trek in Nepal. I followed my father and finished the journey on foot. Don't even think about leaving me behind." James just shook his head and followed her to the airport exit. She really is a wild little thing, he thought. James was kidding about the unpaved roads. The roads to his parents' house had been finished a decade ago. The journey there was no longer as remote and difficult as it had once been, though it was still pretty rural and out of the way. But it didn't matter because she obviously wasn't deterred by the prospect of a journey into the Blue Ridge Mountains. James, shouldn't we be going to the rental car location? What are we doing here? They were outside a Mercedes-Benz dealership not far from the Richmond airport. Vanessa looked at him with a puzzled expression the moment they pulled up in the cab. James grinned and held the door open for her. We're here to buy a car. What, do you want to walk? This isn't Nepal. It was early afternoon. James walked into the showroom while Vanessa admired a Mercedes GLC 300 in the lot. He saw a few salesmen chatting amongst themselves, expecting one of them to welcome him to the shop. Instead, they took one look at his attire and went right back to their conversation. It was a different story when Vanessa walked in. The salesman's eyes lit up like bulbs. They looked her up and down with no subtlety, or manners for that matter. James sighed. It was the Gucci outlet in New York all over again. The employers here were just as snobbish, judging him on appearance alone. Didn't they train these people? He was in no mood for an argument, though. He was here to buy a Mercedes-Benz, not to teach these idiots how to treat their customers. Episode 56. Take Me Home. James walked straight to the showroom and looked at the cars one by one. But even if he could keep his emotions in check, Vanessa could not. She was usually gentle and kind in front of him, but her temper came out when confronting others, particularly those who irked her. She pointed at the two salesmen. Didn't you see someone come in just now? Are you guys blind? Why aren't you doing your job? The salesmen looked at each other and slowly came over to the showroom. If she wasn't such a babe, they probably wouldn't have paid any attention to her. Vanessa wasn't having any of their nonsense. She was the daughter of a rich businessman. She knew 1,000 ways to deal with these people and their snobbish attitudes. She took out her phone. I wonder what will happen when I call the Mercedes-Benz regional sales director and ask him how he trains his employees here. When they heard that, the salesman snapped to attention. How would this woman even know that the regional sales director was their boss? They quickly adjusted their attitude and began fawning over her. Which car would you like to see, ma'am? We're here to help in any way. Vanessa looked at them dismissively and pointed at James. He's the one who wants to buy a car, not me. The salesman did not dare to ignore James this time. They scurried over to him before this crazy woman could start dialing up their boss. But it was too late. Another salesman, a young man in his 20s, had approached James and asked politely, Sir, I can help you if you're in the market for a vehicle today. James could tell at a glance he was new to the job. He wondered if he was the young guy's very first customer. Before James could reply, they were interrupted by the other two guys. One of them pointed at the youngster and shooed him off. Harry, you can go. We'll serve this customer. The young man simply nodded and turned around to leave. The older salesman finally addressed James with an insulting note of presumption. Hello, sir. My name is Danny Morris, your sales representative today. May I ask which vehicle you're interested in? The smile on his face, however, was as fake as the Rolex on his wrist. Although Morris was making a show of serving James, he really didn't want to waste his time. His buddy shared his feelings. They weren't going to sell a car to this bum, but they were intimidated by the wildcat woman with him, so they went through the motions of pretending they cared. James saw through it all. He looked them up and down and simply said, No thanks. If he wasn't in a hurry, he would have gone to another dealership. There were plenty of Mercedes-Benz shops in and around Richmond. Instead, he waved the young salesman back over. Harry, would you mind showing me my choices? James couldn't help having a sour taste in his mouth. After all, buying a car, especially a Mercedes-Benz, should be an enjoyable experience. He did not come here to be treated like crap. Danny Morris wouldn't let it go. Sir, are you sure you want him? He's only been working here a month. There was a hint of mockery in Morris's tone. Harry seemed embarrassed by the scene. He knew the others would be furious with him later if he serviced this customer. Sir, Danny is right. I'm still learning the ropes. James wasn't having it. So what if you're new? Who hasn't been a new employee? Everyone starts somewhere. Morris could see he had no choice. All right then, he huffed. Harry, please serve this gentleman. He didn't care. He knew this tramp couldn't afford a Mercedes anyway, hot girlfriend or not. James got right down to business. He pointed at the luxury SUV to his left. "Harry, I want this G55 AMG. Could you please draw up the paperwork? I'm in a bit of a hurry." Danny Morris froze in his tracks and spun around. A G55 AMG? What? It cost more than $150,000. Morris could have cried when he thought about the commission he just let slip through his fingers. The other salesman looked like he'd been kicked in the stomach. He just stood there with blank eyes, thinking about the commission check he wouldn't be cashing either. Harry Burton was stunned. He felt his mind going blank. He'd been working there barely a month. He hadn't closed a single sale yet. Today, he'd mustered the courage to approach this customer, even if he didn't look like a promising sale. And guess what? He hit the jackpot. Still, he was in disbelief. "Sir, are you sure?" James's voice left little room for doubt. "What's there to be sure about? Here's my driver's license. Let's do this. It would be best if it's done within an hour. Oh, and I'm paying full price in cash. You'll accept an e-payment, right?" In fact, James had already made up his mind to buy a Mercedes G55 AMG before coming here. Since his home county had many mountainous roads, he knew the off-road vehicle would be perfect. Plus, it had lots of space. His parents wouldn't feel uncomfortable driving in it. They didn't like being crammed into tiny clown cars, as they put it. "Yes, sir," Harry said. "I'll get things started right away." He took James's license and rushed back to the finance manager's office to draw up the contracts. Vanessa watched the entire episode with glee. She went over to the sulking older salesman and continued to rub their noses in it. James sat in the waiting area and laughed. Man, she is ruthless, he thought. To be honest, he rather enjoyed her exacting a little revenge. As the song says, money makes the world go round. The process of buying a Mercedes-Benz with cash on the spot went smoothly. In less than an hour, everything was settled. Harry Burton handed him the keys and sales packet with a grateful and slightly dazed smile. James drove straight to the largest shopping center in Richmond. He filled the cargo bay of the G55 with all kinds of stuff for his parents. Food, liquor, some nice flowers for the table, and various practical things he thought they could use. Then he went to the bank and withdrew $10,000 in cash. From there, they drove into the Blue Ridge. As they passed gorgeous expanses of oak, hemlock, and pine forest, James reflected on how much he missed his hometown. The hills, the food, the music, the people. By sheer coincidence, "Take Me Home, Country Roads" came on the radio. He began singing along without a trace of embarrassment. Vanessa was a carefree girl who knew how to have fun. When she saw James singing to the John Denver song, she joined right in. The two of them sang together, creating a jovial atmosphere in the car as the trees swept past the windshield. She found that the more time that she spent with James, the more she liked him. James dialed his parents' number with the Mercedes hand-free command system. His mother picked up on 2 rings. "Hey, Mom, I'm on my way from Richmond now. I should be there by 7 tonight. Can you wait on supper until I get home? You'd better be making my favorite fried chicken." Vanessa could hear the joy in his mother's voice as it came through the speaker. Good. No problem. I'll have more food than you can possibly eat." "It's not all for me, Mom. I'm bringing a mysterious guest with me." "A mysterious guest?" his mother asked. "Judging from your sneaky tone, it sounds like you're bringing a wife here to meet us." James looked over at Vanessa's blushing face. He gave her a mischievous wink. "Mom, I didn't say that." Vanessa glared playfully at James. She kind of hoped he had less than platonic intentions for her. His mother prated on for a bit, then she said she needed to start preparing supper. "All right, Mom, we'll see you soon." The radio station was now playing classic Johnny Cash. The two of them started singing again. It was a wonderful drive.